Maya nodded. You've built something incredible here, Elijah. Something that will last for generations. Elijah's gaze swept across the room, taking in the diverse crowd, the vibrant art, and the energy of connection that filled the space. It's not about what I've built, he said quietly. It's about the lives it's touched and the barriers it's broken. As the night drew to a close, Elijah walked through the gallery, watching visitors marvel at the works on display. Each piece was a testament to the artists who had poured their hearts and souls into their creations. And each visitor was a reminder of the impact those creations could have. Elijah Harper's legacy wasn't just in the art he had created, it was in the lives he had uplifted, the spaces he had transformed, and the prejudices he had dismantled. He had shown the world that talent and vision transcend appearances, and that the true power of art lies in its ability to connect us, to inspire us, and to remind us of our shared humanity. As he stepped outside into the cool night air, Elijah looked up at the sign above the gallery door, the Harper Collective. He smiled, knowing that while his journey had been remarkable, the legacy of his vision would continue to ripple outward, carried forward by the countless lives he had touched. The name Elijah Harper became legendary, and his story was told in classrooms, lecture halls, and art forums around the world. It was a tale of triumph over bias, of talent and perseverance that refused to be diminished by prejudice. But to Elijah, his legacy wasn't about fame or recognition, it was about impact. One evening, years after the gallery's transformation, Elijah stood in the middle of a bustling exhibit. The space hummed with life, the air filled with excited chatter and laughter. Visitors moved through the gallery with awe, pausing to take in the stories told through the art on the walls. Elijah watched silently, his hands tucked into his pockets, as a group of children gathered around an interactive piece. A guide explained the story behind it, how the artist, once overlooked and struggling to find a platform, had been discovered through the Harper Collective. The children listened with wide eyes, their imaginations sparked. A young woman approached Elijah hesitantly, holding a sketchpad under her arm. "Mr. Harper?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. He turned and smiled warmly. "Yes? I just wanted to thank you," she said, her cheeks flushing. "This place, it's changed my life. I've always wanted to be an artist, but I didn't think there was a space for someone like me. Then I came here, and I realized there is." Elijah looked at her sketchpad. "May I?" he asked gently. She handed it over, and Elijah flipped through the pages, nodding appreciatively. "You have a gift," he said. "Keep creating. Keep telling your story. The world needs it." The woman's eyes lit up, and she nodded fervently. As the evening wore on, Elijah found himself drawn back to the centerpiece of the gallery, Ebb and Flow. It was the painting that had started it all, the one that Rebecca Sloan had dismissed as too expensive for a man she had judged by his appearance. Now, it stood as a symbol of resilience and transformation, admired by thousands. A plaque beside the painting told its story, not just of its creation but of the journey it represented, how an artist had turned rejection into opportunity, and how that opportunity had sparked a movement that changed the art world forever. Elijah stood before the painting, reflecting on the path that had brought him here. He thought about the moments of doubt, the dismissals, and the quiet determination that had carried him through it all. What had begun as a moment of dismissal had become a platform for change, a stage on which countless voices could now shine. His thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Elijah turned to see Maya Rivera, the gallery's director and one of the first artists he had mentored after taking over. Maya had grown into a leader in her own right, carrying forward Elijah's mission with passion and dedication. "It is," Elijah said, smiling. "But the beauty isn't just in the painting, it's in what it represents. And for what it's worth, I've learned from you. Not just about art, but about humility." Elijah's expression softened slightly. "Then this gallery has already served its purpose," he said quietly. Rebecca smiled faintly, though the weight of her regret was still visible. "Thank you for giving me the chance to see this," she said, gesturing toward the gallery. "And for reminding me that change is possible, even when it's uncomfortable." She lingered near ebb and flow for a while longer, lost in thought. The vibrant swirls of color seemed to take on new meaning, representing not just Elijah's journey but her own realization of how deeply she had misjudged him. For Rebecca, the night was a turning point, not just in her understanding of Elijah Harper but in her view of the world. She had spent years cultivating a space that excluded so many, only to see it transformed into a beacon of inclusivity. As she left the gallery that evening, Rebecca carried with her a sense of gratitude mingled with regret. She had once been blinded by prejudice, but Elijah's grace and vision had shown her another way. For Elijah, the conversation was not about vindication but about progress. He didn't need Rebecca's apology to validate his success, but he understood the importance of moments like this, moments where understanding and change began to take root. And as he watched Rebecca walk out into the night, he turned back to the crowd inside the gallery, feeling more certain than ever that the Harper Collective was fulfilling its mission, to open minds, challenge biases, and create a world where art, and the people who make it, could truly thrive. Under Elijah Harper's visionary leadership, the Harper Collective became more than just a gallery, it evolved into a global movement. From the moment he took ownership, Elijah's mission had been clear: to build a space where art could bridge divides, challenge prejudices, and elevate voices that had long been silenced. What began as a single gallery in the heart of the city transformed into a network of art spaces, each a hub for creativity and empowerment. The gallery's walls were no longer reserved for the elite few or dominated by familiar names. Instead, they showcased an eclectic mix of talent from every corner of the world, artists who infused their works with stories of resilience, hope, and identity. Emerging painters from inner cities, sculptors from remote villages, and photographers capturing untold stories found a platform at the Harper Collective. It wasn't just a gallery, it was a sanctuary for expression. Elijah's vision drew patrons from all walks of life. Art collectors who had once frequented exclusive, insular galleries were drawn to the vibrancy and authenticity of the Harper Collective. Students, families, and young artists filled its halls, inspired not only by the art but also by the story behind the gallery's creation. The crowd at the Harper Collective thinned as the evening wore on, leaving a quieter, more reflective atmosphere in the gallery. The hum of conversation became a gentle murmur, and the once bustling energy settled into a calm appreciation of the art. Elijah Harper stood near the entrance, observing the scene with a sense of quiet pride. This was no longer just an art gallery, it was a place of transformation, a hub where creativity and inclusivity thrived. As Elijah turned toward the centerpiece of the exhibit, Ebb and Flow, he noticed a familiar figure standing before the painting. Rebecca Sloan, the former owner of the gallery, lingered there, her hands clasped in front of her. She was dressed elegantly but modestly, a far cry from the confident, imposing woman she had once been. Her shoulders were slightly hunched, and her gaze was fixed on the painting, as though searching for something beyond its vibrant colors. Elijah hesitated for a moment, considering whether to approach, but before he could make a decision, Rebecca turned and caught his eye. She hesitated, then slowly walked toward him, her expression a mixture of uncertainty and humility. "Mr. Harper," she began softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was hoping to have a word with you." Elijah nodded, gesturing toward a quieter corner of the gallery. They moved away from the crowd, finding a spot where they could speak without interruption. Rebecca took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice faltering. "A profound one." Elijah's expression remained calm, his gaze steady, but unreadable. He didn't interrupt, letting her continue. "I misjudged you, terribly," Rebecca admitted, her voice tinged with regret. "When you first walked into this gallery, I looked at you and saw, well, I didn't see you. I saw my assumptions, my biases. And because of that, I failed to recognize the greatness standing right in front of me." She paused, glancing back toward Ebb and Flow. "When I think about how I spoke to you that day, how I dismissed you so easily, it's a moment I'll always regret. But seeing what you've done here, the way you've transformed this gallery, it's humbling. You've turned it into something far beyond what I ever imagined it could be." Elijah studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Then, with a measured tone, he replied, "It's never too late to learn, Miss Sloane." Rebecca looked up at him, surprised by his graciousness. "Prejudice blinds us all at some point," Elijah continued, his voice steady but firm. "The important thing is what we choose to do once we see it. This gallery isn't just about art, it's about challenging those assumptions, about creating a space where everyone's voice matters." Rebecca nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You've done more than challenge assumptions, Mr. Harper. You've set an example." The gallery buzzed with energy as artists, collectors, critics, and art enthusiasts gathered to celebrate the new era of the Harper Collective. The space, once defined by quiet whispers and stiff formality, now pulsed with laughter, conversation, and a sense of belonging. Rebecca Sloane attended the event, slipping quietly into the crowd. She had received an invitation, Elijah's way of extending an olive branch, though she wasn't sure if it was kindness or poetic irony. Dressed in muted tones, she tried to blend in, avoiding eye contact with those who recognized her. As she wandered through the gallery, Rebecca was struck by how different it felt. The exclusivity she had prided herself on had been replaced with warmth and inclusivity. Patrons from all walks of life moved through the space, engaging with the art and each other. When Rebecca finally stood before Ebb and Flow, she felt a pang of regret. The painting, more breathtaking than she remembered, seemed to radiate a new kind of energy under Elijah's curation. A plaque beside it detailed the story of its creation and its significance to Elijah's journey. The crowd around the painting marveled, their admiration palpable. "I didn't realize how much this piece would resonate," Rebecca heard someone say. "It's incredible," another replied. "And to think he's the one who owns the gallery now. What a full-circle moment." Rebecca swallowed hard, feeling the sting of her misjudgment more acutely than ever. She remembered dismissing Elijah as out of place, assuming he had no business in her gallery. Now, he was not only the owner but the centerpiece of the art world she had once tried to gatekeep. Later that evening, Rebecca spotted Elijah near the entrance, surrounded by a group of patrons congratulating him on the gallery's transformation. He caught her gaze, and for a moment, their eyes met. She hesitated, then walked over. "Mr. Harper," she began awkwardly, her voice barely audible above the crowd. "I just wanted to say, the gallery looks wonderful. You've done something truly remarkable here." Elijah studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he offered a small smile. "Thank you, Miss Sloane," he said simply. "Enjoy the exhibit." Rebecca nodded, grateful for his grace, but acutely aware of the lesson her own actions had taught her. As the night went on, Elijah stood near Ebb and Flow, watching as visitors admired the works on display. For him, this wasn't just a victory, it was the beginning of a movement. The Harper Collective was no longer just a gallery, it was a symbol of resilience, a platform for unheard voices, and proof that true value could never be judged by appearances. The takeover wasn't just about reclaiming a space, it was about redefining it, turning it into something far greater than it had ever been. And as Elijah looked around the gallery, filled with laughter, conversation, and inspiration, he knew he had achieved exactly that. Rebecca stood rooted to the spot, clutching the folder as her mind raced. The man she had dismissed as insignificant had returned, not just as an artist but as a force she couldn't ignore. As Elijah exited the gallery, he allowed himself a small smile. The pieces were in motion, and soon, the Davenport Gallery would become something far greater than it had ever been. Rebecca Sloane sat in her office, staring blankly at the folder Elijah Harper's legal team had handed her just days ago. The weight of her misjudgment, and the reality of the gallery's precarious finances, pressed down on her. For years, she had ignored the warning signs: declining foot traffic, lukewarm sales, and an industry moving toward inclusivity while she clung to exclusivity. Now, the gallery she had spent decades cultivating was slipping through her fingers. Despite her protests, the sale moved quickly. Elijah's team, efficient and thorough, had done their homework. They had uncovered the gallery's mounting debts, its unsustainable operating costs, and Rebecca's failed attempts to attract new investors. The offer Elijah presented wasn't just generous, It was her only viable option to avoid bankruptcy. Within a month, the paperwork was finalized, and Rebecca handed over the keys to the gallery she had once considered her crown jewel. As she walked out of the space for the last time, she couldn't help but glance at the centerpiece of the room, Ebb and Flow. The very painting she had used to impress wealthy patrons now felt like a mocking reminder of her arrogance. Elijah Harper wasted no time in taking control. The first thing he did was reimagine the gallery from the ground up. Gone were the stark white walls and the cold, minimalist decor that had defined the space under Rebecca's ownership. In their place were warm earth tones, rich textures, and thoughtful lighting that invited visitors to linger and connect with the art. The gallery's new name, the Harper Collective, was prominently displayed above the entrance, signaling a fresh start. Elijah's vision was clear: the gallery would no longer be a sterile playground for the elite. Instead, it would become a vibrant hub for emerging and underrepresented artists, those whose voices had been overlooked or dismissed by the traditional art world. He curated a diverse team of passionate individuals who shared his vision, replacing the gallery's former staff with people who understood the power of art to transform and connect. In preparation for the grand reopening, Elijah planned a bold first exhibit, a showcase of his own works. He called it Unveiled, a retrospective of his journey as an artist. The collection included some of his most iconic pieces, but the centerpiece was Ebb and Flow. The painting that had been Rebecca's symbol of exclusivity now took on new meaning as a testament to resilience, vision, and transformation. Opening night was nothing short of a spectacle. She stammered, her voice unsteady. "Yes," Elijah said, his tone calm but pointed. "I'm the artist whose work you dismissed last week. The one you assumed couldn't afford to even admire the pieces here, let alone belong in this space." He let the weight of his words hang in the air for a moment before continuing. "I've decided I'd like to buy this gallery." Rebecca's face drained of color. Her usual air of superiority was replaced by a mix of disbelief and panic. "Wait, you're Elijah Harper?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The Elijah Harper?" Elijah inclined his head slightly. "The very same," he replied. Rebecca's eyes darted to the painting Ebb and Flow, still proudly displayed in the center of the room. It suddenly dawned on her that the man she had mocked just days ago was the creator of the masterpiece she had been boasting about to potential buyers. I didn't realize," she stuttered, her usual composure crumbling. "I know," Elijah said, his voice even. "But it's not important now. What matters is that this gallery is struggling financially. I've done my research, Miss Sloane, and I believe I can turn it around." He gestured toward his assistant, who promptly handed Rebecca a thick folder containing the details of his offer. Rebecca hesitated, her trembling hands taking the folder as she scanned the top pages. "This can't be right," she murmured, her voice shaking. "It is," Elijah assured her. "The gallery's debts are significant, and the financial reports indicate a steady decline over the past few years. You've managed to stay afloat, but it's only a matter of time before that changes. My offer is fair, and it ensures the survival of this gallery, but under my ownership." Rebecca looked up at him, her face pale and her confidence utterly shattered. She began, but the words seemed to catch in her throat. "You see, Miss Sloane," Elijah continued, his tone firm but not unkind, "this gallery has potential. It's a beautiful space with a legacy worth preserving. But its current model, its exclusivity, its narrow focus, has become a liability, not a strength. I intend to make it into something greater, a place where artists of all backgrounds can thrive, where patrons come to experience more than just a transaction. I want it to be a beacon for inclusivity and innovation." Rebecca stood frozen, the weight of her misjudgment pressing down on her. She wanted to argue, to protest, but deep down, she knew Elijah was right. The gallery's financial troubles had been mounting for years, and she had been clinging to the illusion of stability. Elijah glanced around the gallery, his gaze lingering on Ebb and Flow. "This isn't personal, Miss Sloane," he said finally, his voice softer. "It's about what this gallery could be. You'll have time to review the offer, but I suggest you consider it carefully. I'm prepared to move quickly." With that, Elijah turned and walked away, his team following close behind. For a moment, Elijah said nothing, his gaze fixed on the painting. Then, with the same calm demeanor, he turned back to Rebecca. "Thank you for your time," he said simply. Without another word, Elijah walked out of the gallery, leaving Rebecca shaking her head and muttering under her breath about wasting her time. Unbeknownst to her, the man she had just dismissed so casually was none other than the artist whose work she had proudly displayed as the centerpiece of her gallery. Elijah Harper, the world-famous artist she had just described, had walked through her doors not as a buyer but as a creator, seeking to see his work through the eyes of others. As Elijah stepped back into the crisp autumn air, a small smile played on his lips. Rebecca's arrogance amused him, but he felt no anger. He had learned long ago that people often judge others by appearances, and he had no desire to correct her. For now, he would let her live in ignorance. But deep down, Elijah knew that this was not the last time their paths would cross. The seeds of change had been planted, and soon, Rebecca Sloan would come to understand the true value of the man she had dismissed so easily. A week after his quiet dismissal, Elijah Harper stood once again at the entrance of the Davenport Gallery. This time, he was a stark contrast to the casually dressed man Rebecca Sloan had dismissed without a second thought. His tailored navy blue suit was impeccably fitted, paired with polished leather shoes and a sleek leather briefcase in hand. Beside him stood his assistant, holding a tablet, and two members of his legal team, their professional demeanor exuding authority. The gallery was just as bustling as before, its usual clientele browsing the latest displays of wealth and culture. Rebecca Sloan was stationed at her customary spot near the main desk, laughing animatedly with a well-dressed couple who were admiring a sculpture. She seemed entirely at ease, oblivious to the storm about to disrupt her carefully curated world. Elijah took a moment to observe the scene before walking deliberately toward Rebecca. His footsteps echoed on the polished marble floors, drawing subtle glances from patrons as he approached. Rebecca, still engaged in her conversation, didn't notice him until he was standing directly in front of her. "Miss Sloan," Elijah said, his voice calm yet commanding. Rebecca turned, her laughter halting abruptly. At first, she didn't recognize him. Her eyes flicked over his sharp suit and professional entourage, her expression one of polite curiosity. "Yes? Can I help you?" Elijah offered a faint smile, the same polite expression he had worn during their first encounter. "I'd like to discuss a business opportunity regarding this gallery," he said smoothly. Rebecca blinked, her mind scrambling to place him. Then, like a sudden shockwave, recognition dawned. Her confident posture faltered as her eyes widened. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when Elijah Harper decided to pay an unannounced visit to the Davenport Gallery. The air was cool, the sidewalks bustling with the city's well-dressed elite. Elijah, however, was unbothered by appearances. Dressed in a simple hoodie, jeans, and sneakers that had seen better days, he blended seamlessly into the background, just another face in a crowd. But beneath his unassuming exterior was a man whose talent had captivated the art world and whose work had recently sold for millions at auction. As Elijah stepped into the gallery, the atmosphere shifted. The Davenport Gallery exuded wealth and exclusivity, with its polished marble floors, dramatic lighting, and walls adorned with striking pieces of art. The air carried the faint scent of fresh flowers, strategically placed throughout the space to complement its opulent vibe. Elijah moved quietly through the gallery, his hands tucked into his pockets, his sharp eyes taking in the layout. His heart beat a little faster as he approached the centerpiece of the room, a painting titled Ebb and Flow. The piece was bold and vibrant, with cascading blues and golds that evoked both chaos and harmony. It was unmistakably his work, created during a time of deep introspection and self-discovery. As Elijah stood before the painting, lost in thought, a voice pulled him back to the present. "Can I help you?" He turned to see a middle-aged woman with perfectly styled hair and a tailored blazer. Her name tag read Rebecca Sloan, owner. Her sharp eyes scanned him from head to toe, her expression quickly shifting from neutral to skeptical. Elijah offered a polite smile. Yes, I'd like to learn more about this painting, he said, gesturing toward Ebb and Flow. Rebecca hesitated for a moment, as if debating whether to engage with him. Then, with a practiced air of superiority, she approached the painting, her heels clicking against the marble floor. This piece, she began, folding her arms, is by a world-famous artist. His work is highly sought after and has been featured in galleries across the globe. She paused, glancing at Elijah's casual attire. It's worth more than your car, she added with a faint smirk, assuming you even own one. Elijah raised an eyebrow, the faintest hint of amusement flickering across his face. A world-famous artist, you say? That's right, Rebecca replied, clearly enjoying her moment of authority. This isn't the kind of art you'll find in some flea market. It's for serious collectors, people who understand its value. She gave him a pointed look. Elijah nodded thoughtfully. Interesting, he said softly, his tone neutral. Rebecca's patience appeared to be wearing thin. She glanced over her shoulder at a group of well-dressed patrons who had just entered the gallery. Look, she said curtly, if you're not here to buy, I have other clients to attend to. We cater to a certain caliber of buyer. As the years passed, the Harper Collective grew far beyond what even Elijah Harper had envisioned. What had started as a reimagining of a single gallery transformed into a global movement that redefined the art world. Satellite galleries began popping up in cities across the world, each carrying the same mission of inclusivity, innovation, and storytelling that Elijah had instilled in the original space. Elijah's philosophy, that art was more than a luxury, that it was a language capable of bridging divides and healing wounds, resonated deeply in a world hungry for connection. His story, one of triumph over bias and the transformative power of perseverance, became a beacon for aspiring artists and a case study in art schools, leadership programs, and cultural forums. But Elijah didn't stop with the galleries. He launched the Harper Initiative, a nonprofit organization dedicated to funding art programs in underserved communities. Workshops, public art installations, and scholarships blossomed in places where creativity had long been stifled by lack of resources. Children who had never held a paintbrush were suddenly creating murals in their neighborhoods, and young artists who had abandoned their dreams due to financial barriers found new hope through scholarships funded by Elijah's foundation. One such artist was Malik Thompson, a high school student from Detroit who had almost given up on his dream of becoming a sculptor. Through a scholarship from the Harper Initiative, Malik not only attended art school, but eventually exhibited his first collection at the original Harper Collective. On opening night, Malik met Elijah, who had come to personally congratulate him. "You've created something incredible," Elijah said, standing before one of Malik's towering sculptures. "Never doubt the power of your voice. The world is waiting to hear it." Malik's eyes filled with tears as he thanked Elijah. "Your story is what gave me the courage to keep going," he said. Moments like these became the cornerstone of Elijah's legacy. Through every new artist who found their voice, every community transformed by the power of art, and every individual inspired by his story, Elijah's impact rippled outward. One day, Elijah was invited to speak at a global art and culture summit. Leaders, curators, and artists from every corner of the world gathered to hear from the man who had revolutionized the industry. Standing on the grand stage, Elijah addressed the crowd with the same calm confidence that had carried him through his journey. "Art," he began, "is not just a product or a decoration. It is a mirror, reflecting who we are, where we've been, and where we hope to go. It is a language, unbound by words, that speaks to our shared humanity. And most importantly, it is a tool, one that can dismantle walls, amplify voices, and build bridges where none existed before." The room erupted into applause, but Elijah wasn't finished. "My story is just one of many," he continued. "For every artist who is celebrated, there are countless others who remain unseen. It is our responsibility, not just as artists, but as people, to create spaces where those voices can be heard, where their stories can be shared. That is the true legacy of art, its ability to empower, to connect, and to endure." The speech became a rallying cry, igniting new initiatives across the globe. Museums partnered with the Harper Initiative to diversify their collections, and art schools began offering free programs to students in low-income communities. The ripple effect was undeniable, reshaping the way the world valued art and the people who created it. Years later, Elijah returned to the Harper Collective for its 25th anniversary. The original gallery had been preserved as a cultural landmark, its walls bearing the works of artists from all walks of life. Visitors of all ages filled the space, marveling at the art and learning about the stories behind it. In the center of the main hall stood Ebb and Flow, the painting that had sparked Elijah's journey. Now surrounded by works from artists who had been inspired by him, it was a symbol not just of resilience, but of the transformative power of vision and determination. As Elijah wandered through the gallery, he saw children sketching, teenagers debating the meaning of a sculpture, and elders sharing stories sparked by the art. The space was alive, a testament to everything he had worked to create. One young artist approached him, holding a small canvas in her hands. "Mr. Harper," she said shyly, "this place, it's changed my life. I wanted to show you what I've been working on." Elijah took the canvas, a small but powerful abstract piece, and smiled. "It's beautiful," he said. "Keep creating. The world needs your voice." As he handed the canvas back, the artist beamed, and Elijah felt the familiar warmth of purpose. His work wasn't just about what he had accomplished, it was about what others could achieve because of the spaces he had built. The ripple effect of the Harper Collective continued to spread, touching lives and reshaping the art world. Elijah Harper's name became synonymous with transformation, his legacy a living testament to the belief that art could indeed change the world.